When I think of where I have been and where I want to go, I cannot take and put who I am as a Cheyenne person on the shelf. It's always with me. My name in Cheyenne was at birth Nisa'ia, which means standing 20 woman. And when I graduated from college, Southwestern Oklahoma State University in 1954, my name was changed to Ho'oista'ona, which translates into the woman who comes to offer prayer or prayer woman.
A name that Dr. Henrietta Mann carries proudly, whether she's speaking to an audience of international scholars or a group of Cheyenne and Arapaho youth.
You have all the power there. Use it well.
Dr. Mann, or Henry as she was known, spent her early days around Hammond, Oklahoma.
There were 4 generations of us, I am told, that lived in this one 3-room dwelling. I can remember bits and pieces of living in that home, which was just as much filled with love as it was with people. And I remember the bed in the kitchen. And I believe that must have been where my great-grandmother, White Buffalo Woman, whose name is Homa'ewoista, shortened form, Homa'oista, lived. So she was a survivor of Sand Creek in 1864 and a survivor of the battle along the Ouachita River or along the Lodgepole River 4 years later, and was among those taken captive eventually to Fort Supply and to Fort Hays. She was the family matriarch. We spoke primarily Cheyenne, and of course that was the only language in which my great-grandmother could converse, the only language that my grandfather used, and once in a while he would lapse into English, but not very often. And I would think that in many ways he was the one that made sure that I really learned how to use our language. My parents, having gone to a Bureau of Indian Affairs boarding school on their reservation then at Concho, spoke English.
The foundation was set early on for Henry to pursue a career in education. School was something she loved. She learned quickly, though, that being a native child in a mostly white school system would be a challenge.
Does someone know how to count to 100 for me? Of course I knew. Never called upon. There was the little Anglo children in my classroom that were called upon. What about the colors? I knew the colors, especially the primary colors. Was I ever called on? Would you go out and dust this eraser for me? I don't think any Indian child was ever called out to dust the erasers, which is sort of a privilege in those classrooms. And we Indian children were just relegated to the back of the room. And it seemed as if we were just to sit there and say nothing. I rode home on the bus about not quite 2 miles to talks of dirty Indian, lazy Indian, and other such uncomplimentary remarks. But I sat there because by virtue of having the last name of Mann, it seemed like everything that I did, my father would say, remember, you're a man. You can't cry. Not in public anyway.
Henrietta's family moved a number of times, which forced her to change schools often, but she finally convinced them to let her stay with her aunt in Hammond.
And I graduated from Hammond High School. And when I graduated, I was given a scholarship to Southwestern Oklahoma State University by an organization, and they gave the scholarship for those individuals who held promise to become future teachers. I completed my master's degree in 1970, already had a job teaching in Native American Studies at the University of California, Berkeley, Cal Berkeley. And it was a heyday of activism. That was when the Indians from the Bay Area were on Alcatraz Island, the Rock. It was a time of Black Panthers. It was a time of Black Power, Red Power. in time of Poor People's Marches. It was really an exciting time to be at UC Berkeley. And I really liked it there, but I had to stop as a parent by that time and stop to think, is this really where I want my children to grow up?
She eventually found a second home in Montana, spending almost 30 years at the University of Montana, and now as special assistant to the president of Montana State. In 2008, she took a one-year leave of absence to help establish the Cheyenne and Arapaho Tribal College. That 1 year had stretched into 5.
I'm still expected back. I still carry the title of Special Assistant to the President of Montana State University in Bozeman. And so now I'm facing the biggest challenge in my life and trying to build the tribal college for the people with limited funding, but recognizing my commitment to them and the fact that their children, and it may be those that have not even come to live on this earth, have a place where they can go and be educated about who they are and where we have been in history. That will help them to become more self-sufficient and just be the kind of good-hearted people, good-hearted Cheyennes, good-hearted Arapahos that we have always been.
She knows it's an uphill climb, but Dr. Mann approaches this latest task with the same determination she had in the classroom at Hammond.
I have a certain drive, but it's a drive not for me to achieve, but to, I guess, create a path, a road that others behind me can follow. Growing up the way I did, because I really can't look at my education without looking at my family. I can't talk about education without looking at my culture. A culture that always has put a great deal of value upon education. It always has, always will.